Hi, welcome to July's Extreme Productivity Experiment. This one is called Fuel, and it's all about the fuel of the brain, the fuel of the body, nutrition, and all that good stuff, basically. So again, like the June experiment, flipping the 9 to 5, where I did 5 till 9 a.m. and then 5 till 9 p.m. And this one was split down into two different sections. So the first section was a couple of weeks of eating an optimum productivity diet. So Colette Hennigan, a friend of mine at Optimum Nutrition, basically came up with just a full, sort of diet plan for me. So Monday to Friday, what am I eating for every single meal? Went out and did all the shopping, bought all these weird powders and supplements and all this stuff. And the idea was to completely and optimally fuel my body and my brain for attention and productivity. So I had a really great consultation with her. She put this plan together. And surprise, surprise, there wasn't too much that was unexpected during that first couple of weeks. It turns out that if you eat really well, then you perform better, all that sort of stuff that you would expect, really. By 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I wasn't feeling like I was slumping. So if you're sitting here watching this at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon and you've been in the office all day and you're really starting to feel really tired, here's the news for you. Change your diet. Like, seriously, it really does help. Looking back on that couple of weeks, a couple of years later, so one of the things that I was required to have as part of this Optimum Nutrition was the Brain Fuel Shake. We'll put the recipe for it in the information here. And it's basically a whole load of powders, hemp powder and camu and all this strange stuff. And do I still drink it now? Absolutely not. Like, it's pretty disgusting tasting. So every morning it was a bit like, sort of trying to drink it. Like, it wasn't great. But like, I certainly think about nutrition much more than I did before, and certain elements of that. So, for example, on my porridge now I have chia seeds, which I sort of discovered in 2013 for my marathon training. The book Born to Run talks about chia seeds a lot, and they're just a real kind of superfood. So I tend to put those on my porridge anyway, and I do use kind of supplements and a few other things, just kind of natural supplement stuff that is very handy and useful, and I just find works. I find if I'm not taking it, I do feel more tired, and if I'm taking it, I feel much better. Some of that stuff might be kind of placebo. I don't know whether having chia seeds on my porridge is actually like having that much of an effect, but it certainly seems to. Like, it certainly really seems to, and I do think that's the medical evidence is there, right? Like, so it kind of makes sense. Right, the second part of Fuel was something very, very different. I wanted something to contrast that with, because I was expecting to get the findings that I did get in that Optimum Nutrition time, and it's a bit like, well, that's kind of what you'd expect, right? So let's take it the other way. So I'd set up this month to be July, particularly because I knew that it was Ramadan, and my friends over at productivemuslim.com had given me this idea of, why don't you get involved and do some fasting for Ramadan? So actually take part in the same fast as us, do it in the same way as us. And Mohammed there in particular was really great at just preparing me for it, both kind of, physically what to expect, and just mentally what you're going to have to deal with, and just really getting me ready for it. And we talked about it quite a lot. I think the original idea was I was going to do a day, and I said to Mohammed, I don't think that's long enough. He didn't want me to do the whole thing because, I didn't want to do the whole thing because it would take me beyond the experiment month, which is like a slightly shallow reason when it's something so spiritual. But like, by the same token, he didn't really want me to do the whole thing, because he's like, as a first timer doing this, you need to just take this quite seriously, or this is going to be hard work. So we settled on the idea of me just doing 3 days. So I did it in the first week of Ramadan that year, and this was where it got kind of interesting for me on a couple of levels. So the first aspect of this was just me doing a blog on the Think Productive site and syndicating that on productivemuslim.com, and Muslims around the world just picking up this story, basically. Who's this guy who's talking about the productivity of Ramadan? Can we still be productive as Muslims when we're fasting? Here's someone who's coming at this from the productivity expert angle. But more importantly than that, just, here's somebody who's not a Muslim who's willing to just try this stuff and is willing to just embrace an aspect of our culture at a time when, you know, huge parts of our culture are kind of really under attack and, you know, feeling very victimized. And so I just found that, like, on a kind of human level, just a really humbling experience to have all these people just kind of reaching out and saying, you know, thank you for doing this. Here's some tips for you, and we're kind of swapping advice and all this stuff. Really, really lovely. From all around the world, you know, everywhere from, you know, Muslims in Wales to in the Middle East to in, you know, Israel, all these places. It was really, really, really great to get that kind of sense of community and connection around the world. Here's where it was kind of interesting from a productivity point of view. I was really fully expecting that the outcome for my productivity was going to be it would ruin my productivity, and it didn't. There were some pretty awful physical effects of it. So I had these headache pangs, which I think was just sugar withdrawal and caffeine withdrawal. You know, I just felt terrible on the first day. Like, the back of my head, I just couldn't move it from side to side because it was just aching so much. That really subsided on day 2 and 3, and I just felt kind of a bit weak and a bit strange on the first day. Once I got into like the 2nd and 3rd days, I really felt I felt much lighter. I felt like I was almost like floating. Some very odd physical sensations, but that just felt very light. And what it meant was I was sat at my desk, really feeling quite sort of peaceful and quite in the zone, at the same time as not having to think about what I'm going to have for lunch, not having to get up and boil the kettle, not having to think about what I was going to drink. So just not having that sort of almost distraction that food brings as well. And that's not to say I was chained to my desk. I mean, there's some really nice bits of advice that I was getting from the productive Muslim community around, you know, splashing water on your face, walking around the block and getting fresh air for 5 minutes, you know, stretching, all these things that can just help you to reboot your brain when you're not having food. So I was doing all of those kind of little things around it as well, but just really got this like quite amazing sense of focus from it, and felt like I did some really good work on days 2 and 3. So again, it's one of those things where I've obviously not gone back to fasting for Ramadan since then. I've not converted or anything like that. But like, I think, you know, fasting, I was fully expecting to be something that could only be negative for productivity, and really found you know, something quite interesting and profound about what it did to my attention during that time. So I think, you know, I will come back to that. Certainly things like the 5-2 diet and stuff. I think there's you know, there's something in that from a kind of body management sort of point of view and all of that, and that I find quite interesting. And, you know, it seems to me more scientifically backed up than a lot of the other, you know, sort of physical regimes that you find out there, if that's the best way of putting it. So just a really interesting month. So thanks again to Colette Hennigan from Optimum Nutrition, and to Mohammed and the whole team at productivemuslim.com, and everyone around the world who just made that month so interesting and enlightening, and just a very humbling experience to be a part of. I now in 2015 still do a few of the things around the fuel experiment, so things like the chia seeds, things like just really trying to match my protein with my carbs, all that sort of stuff that I think has really helped me to you know, to put the best fuel into my body as possible to give me the most optimum results when I want it. But like, yeah, I haven't gone back to the brain fuel shakes, haven't gone back to fasting just yet, but I think those things will certainly come in the future. So that's fuel. Think about your fuel, think about your nutrition, and we'll see you on next month's Extreme Productivity Experiment.